I'm going to preface this by saying that you should probably have this on in the background while you're doing other things. You just play a video game, do your chores, whatever it is you have to do. Treat this like a podcast almost. There's no video, nothing interesting to look at, just me and my words, unscripted. I recommend that you do something else while you listen to this and keep your hands occupied and enjoy my thoughts. This part was pre-recorded before the rest of it, so I was just here to let you know and give you a heads up in advance. Thank you for listening. We're going to be talking about Wolverine Origin. Notice the volume was a bit quiet in the last couple, so let's see if this rectifies that issue a bit. We're going to be talking about Wolverine Origin, one of my favorite pre-X-Men comics. I say pre-X-Men because this takes place technically before any of the actual X-Men comics. This is chronologically one of the first X-Men comics. That's why it's second here after Rise of Apocalypse. Now, this story is written by Paul Jenkins. I'm not actually terribly familiar with Paul Jenkins' body of work. Art is by Andy Kubert, one of my favorite comic artists, the Kubert brothers, just together. Some of my favorite comic artists. I like Andy's art significantly less than Adam's art. Adam has more of that really just the kind of style I just love in comics, whereas Andy, well, similar. He draws, I guess, a bit more cartoonishly, I guess. Their styles are very similar, though. Andy's most famous work is probably when he worked with Adam on Ultimate X-Men, which was one of the flagship series of the Ultimate Marvel Universe. So Paul Jenkins was commissioned by Joe Quesada to write this. This was an idea Joe Quesada had shortly after he became editor-in-chief over at Marvel. Quesada was having a meeting with the producer of the X-Men movie, and during this meeting, they're talking about, we have to do a miniseries telling Wolverine's origin. And he asked, okay, but why? And Quesada kept saying, well, I don't want the movies to screw this up. Imagine that they show us Wolverine's backstory in a movie and it's terrible. That's an explanation that makes a lot of sense. The producer was still like, no, don't do this. This is a bad idea. Please, Joe. I'm telling you to reconsider. But Joe's heart was set on doing this. So him and Bill Jemas, who I think co-president of Marvel, or had some really high-up role like that, him, Quesada, and Paul Jenkins came up with a story together, and Paul Jenkins scripted it. Quesada and Jenkins both seem very proud of this series, and think of it as a very high point in their tenures at Marvel. While Bill Jemas doesn't seem to like it that much. In his ego project, Marvel, he went out of his way to make fun of this series in a really stupid way. Do not read Marvel. That is one of the worst comic books ever made. Andy Kubert inked this himself, and the colors were by Richard Isanov, a French colorist, and his coloring work is amazing. Andy's art is great, as always. You can rely on Andy Kubert to give you really high-quality, great-looking artwork. But the Kubert brothers were very much in that Image kind of era of artists, the kind of thing the L-Boys were doing. Though Andy's was, I guess to say, a little bit more cartoonish, I guess is the term. And his art is great. You know, he delivers like a good bit of like realism injected into it as well, which gives it a nice touch. And I quite like Andy Kubert's art. I prefer Adam, but Andy's great, and I think his art lends itself really well to this kind of like almost storybook-like look. The art here is kind of like Marvel Comics meets some really old storybook with beautiful color illustrations. Aesthetically, this looks almost kind of like a Mark Twain story, almost more than I'd say a Marvel comic, which is really cool. And Andy Kubert illustrated and inked all of this himself. But Richard Isanov's coloring really factors into a lot of what I just said about the art and a lot of the praise I just gave. This is the thing. Your art as a penciler can be saved by great coloring and inking, and it can be ruined by bad coloring and inking. But when you got the great combination of great penciling, great inking, great coloring, your art is going to be on another level, and the art here is on another level. This is a mini-series with less rigid schedules, so Andy Kubert, he was allowed to ink this himself, and then Isanov colored it, and it just looks incredible. From a visual standpoint, this is one of my favorite comics I think I've ever read. While Andy Kubert penciled it, Joe Quesada, who, again, was very passionate about this, he did the covers, and the covers look good. I like the first one in particular. I think that and the cover for the second issue, Inner Child, are probably the ones that most stuck out with readers since then. Minor spoilers ahead for the whole miniseries. I'm not going to be spoiling all like the major moments, but I'll be giving like very generalized synopsis of how it goes from start to end, so there will be minor spoilers ahead. If you want to read this yourself and be completely spoiler-free going in, which I do recommend, you can click away now. If you don't care and you want to hear my synopsis to decide if you should or shouldn't read it, then go ahead. Or if you've already read it and you just want to hear what I say, then again, just go ahead. So let's get into the plot. It is the mid to late 1800s, I think. I don't remember if they actually say that outright. We're following Rose. This is framed as her diary. She's our audience POV character, which to me is a brilliant decision, because this is a whole mystery to us. At the time, especially when this was brand new, nobody knew anything about Wolverine's history before World War II, really. So this is a great idea because she's a stranger to this just like we are, and we're learning about everything alongside her. So this way we can have sometimes even obtrusive exposition just being told to us directly, and it's okay because it's being told to her. She doesn't know the stuff. This is stuff she would need to be told. This just makes sense narratively. This is great writing. From here, this is where we get controversial, is the fact that a lot of people just don't like the idea of showing Wolverine's childhood and think that that kind of demystifies it. That was the concern the producer of the X-Men movies had, and while he ended up loving this series, he did say that he thought it would demystify the character and take away from him. And a lot of people think that. A lot of people read this and just don't like it. Like, this can't be Wolverine's origin because of this, that, and the other, and, you know, whatever. But I loved this. Spoilers, I guess. For my opinion, that's my thesis. I loved it. So, we're getting off track. Rose is an orphan. She's got no family. She's got nobody to care for her. But she's landed a prestigious job at the Howlett estate. They're one of the richest families in Canada. And she landed a job as the caretaker for their son, James. James is the young son of Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Elizabeth Howlett. And he lives there in the big mansion. It's a big, sprawling mansion, which has its own caretaker, who tends to the gardens, Logan, who's worked there for a long time. He's known to be really nasty and just don't mess with him. And Rose is hired as James's caretaker because James is a very sickly boy who is not projected to live very long. They believe that James might not even live to reach adulthood. So they want to give him a dedicated caretaker and hope that his childhood is very comfortable and nice, and that with hope and luck he can live to adulthood because he's been cared for and tended to his whole life. Rose and James are friends with Dog Logan. He's the son of the groundskeeper, Mr. Logan. The three of them sneak off and do kid stuff. They play, they jump in the lake and stuff when they're not supposed to, especially James because he's very sickly and, might catch an infection or something. And this isn't good because Dog Logan is beaten and abused by his father. Mr. Logan does this because he doesn't want his son getting uppity or fraternizing with the rich folk. He wants the son to know that, the rich people do not care about you. They do not look out for you. They do not want anything to do with you, even if you think they do. He has a large resentment towards just the upper class, the 1%, which the Howletts are. He hates them, he hates that, so they don't really explain why, and they don't outright say it, I don't think, but it's heavily implied that him and Elizabeth Howlett had something going on. They had an extramarital affair, and that James is the result of that extramarital affair. They don't say that, but they imply it a lot, which makes me believe that Logan is just really upset from that and just hates the Howletts as a result. Mr. Logan is really upset from that. Maybe even he loved Elizabeth, and now, as a result, he just hates the family for his feelings being rebuffed because it was a forbidden love. It's heavily implied that James looks like him, too, because Mr. Logan just looks like adult Wolverine. Just, if adult Wolverine looked like crap, that'd be Mr. Logan. In some ways, it's a nice fake out because him and Dog Logan as well, you might think, whoa, okay, well, that has to be Wolverine. Because I don't... Okay, this is gonna, be the true test of if I'm a fake fan or not. I don't believe the James Howlett name was very commonly known as Wolverine's real name before this came out. So I think Mr. Logan and his son Dog Logan are kind of a good fake out. Oh, is this the young Wolverine? Originally, when I read this, my thought was, oh my gosh, so Mr. Logan is Wolverine, and something's gonna happen, and then he's gonna have to maybe go on the run, protect Rose or something like that. Something bad's gonna happen here, and then losing his son Dog is going to have a serious effect on this James. I was just thinking something like that. That's an example of why I think it's a good fake out, because subconsciously at the beginning you instinctively just think that it has to be be Wolverine. Like, no other guy looks like Wolverine. He's a total manlet. He's one of the most distinct-looking characters in all of Marvel. And, if not him, then his son. That's what you'd think, right? That's not an unreasonable assumption. So, in that way, I think that it was a genius idea there. The fake out is great, and it just threw me for a loop here when I finally see Mr. Logan go off the deep end, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, well, maybe it's not him. Maybe it is young James, but young James is so sickly and frail. How could it be him? And James being the result of an extramarital affair is interesting. So, in the second issue, Inner Child, Dog Logan has finally become a bitter nihilist who's cynical and hates the world like his father. He's become Junior Dad, in a way. Sorry for anybody who gets that reference. And they're now teenagers, and he tries to... Okay, I don't know how to say this. He tries to... He forces himself on Rose and is eventually stopped before he can go any further. And Rose is just mortified by this. James finds out and spills the beans, and then that creates an irreparable rift between the two. Because he's like, oh, you piece of crap, you ratted me out. And then the two start beefing with each other. James is very passive in this. So Dog Logan takes this eventually so far that Mr. Logan is punished for it. And Mr. Logan ends up this time not beating his son as a result of this. But he ends up deciding this is the last straw, and he decides to go and take this out on the Howletts. So he marches in with a gun and is prepared to go run off with Elizabeth and Rose. But then they're walked in on by Mr. Howlett and James. Unfortunately, Mr. Logan is going full hobo with a shotgun. Sorry to anybody who's seen that movie. And James decides he has to do something before this escalates. During this moment is when his X gene awakens. His mutant powers activate, and he's horrified. He doesn't know what's happening. He's scared, and his mom rambles on about, you're just like your brother. I tried everything I could to keep this from happening. I knew if we moved back here, things... This is my headcanon here. This is not what happened. It might be, actually. I don't know. This is just my headcanon, what I believe happened, what I think. I think Elizabeth Howlett slept with Mr. Logan because she wanted a child to be normal so badly. Her old son was a mutant, as we hear in this dialogue, and he died. We don't know how. I think what happened is that she killed her son because his X gene awakened, revealing he is a mutant, or he was a mutant. And him being a mutant horrified her so much because nobody knows what mutants are at this point. We're not in the age of information yet. Hell, we're not even in the 20th century. To her son was just a monster and she killed him. And then she wanted so desperately to have a son that was normal. So she slept around with Mr. Logan, hoping, like, okay, I don't have Thomas's weirdo genes in me, so now we have a chance of the son being normal. And then he ends up being really sickly, and eventually his X gene awakens. And this is really interesting to me. The child between her and Mr. Logan. But unfortunately, because there's no way she could have known, the X gene runs on her side of the family, not Thomas's. So here we go, this son also is a mutant. And horror of horrors, she can no longer look upon her son because it just reminds her of the failure of her previous child and all the horrible memories that are coming to her again. I think, again, this is my theory. I killed my son because he was a freak. I have a son, Mr. Logan, and not Thomas. Maybe he won't be a freak. Horror of horrors, he's a freak. This is all just speculation in my headcanon, but I think it's neat and very probable. So anyways, back to the story. She scares away her son, tells him, like, you're not my son anymore, and just freaks out. He's rejected by his own mother, and this makes James run away, and Rose follows him. The two take a train ride to the Yukon, where they work in the mines. He does. He takes up the name of Logan, while Rose pretends to be his cousin, and this is to hide the fact that, he's the heir to a vast family fortune. So James has to hide his mutant powers, but he grows a kinship with the wildlife there in the Yukon. So he's fraternizing with the mining crew. He's working in the mines. It's a real you have to be tough to make it here kind of place. And he really toughens up with the mining crew because ever since his X gene activated, as we know, that means his mutant powers are active, and one of them is a healing factor, so he's no longer sickly and frail. And so he's working in the mines by day, and by night he's fraternizing with all the wildlife. During his days off, he's there with all the wolves and stuff in the forest. He is just becoming more beast-like in a way, but he still keeps it under control during the day. He's not like suffering from animal urges he can't control or anything. It's just he feels at home with the animals and in nature. He feels at peace with them. And there's this fat guy, he's a chef named Cookie Malone, who's bullied by everybody. Everybody hates him. He smokes cigars and just all he does is cook, and everyone's like, "You're storing extra food for yourself, Cookie, you fat turd!" And Cookie is the bottom feeder of the whole mining village. But James is the new guy, now going by the name Logan, and he's now seen as the guy on the bottom. And Cookie wants to make sure James knows that. He assaults, beats, and just torments James at every opportunity for his own amusement, just because he thinks, like, I'm not on the bottom anymore, this piece of crap is. Until eventually he has to be taught not to mess with James anymore. And in the background of all of this, Dog Logan is now hired by James's grandfather. I don't know if they've said if he was Thomas's father or Elizabeth's father, who is on his deathbed, and there's no one to pass the Howlett family fortune to. So he asks him to go hunt down James. I don't remember if he's hired Dog to kill James because James is a mutant and ran away at the night a lot of horrible things happened, or if it's to bring him back to inherit the fortune that is rightfully his. I don't remember which. I just read the darn thing, and I just don't remember. So, Dog Logan starts his quest to hunt down James because he views this as his shot at the fortune. And James, while he's in love with Rose, finds out that Rose has started a relationship with someone else, and that he's very conflicted about this. And ultimately, a lot of decisions have to be made in this final issue. He reunites with Dog. He has to decide whose happiness he prioritizes, Rose's or his. Well, what is he going to do with Dog? Dog has a lot of pent-up anger and resentment over what happened that night when James ran away. And it's very interesting, and, this is a Wolverine solo story, so there's got to have a sad ending. Very few Wolverine stories pre-X-Men have happy endings. That's just how it is. And it's a great series, I feel. I was satisfied with the ending because I knew that a lot of this had to be nipped in the bud. By the end, this had to be at least semi-self-contained because none of these elements were featured in the past. Though, to be fair, by the time Wolverine joins the X-Men, he has amnesia and doesn't remember anything before the past, 5 years before he joins. I knew going in, when I first read this several years ago, that all this had to be nipped in the bud. I think they did it in a way that was pretty satisfying. I think it could have been better, but I generally loved this. Another thing I really loved about this was Rose. As an audience POV character, and we're learning about this through her diary, it's a great framing device. Though my problem is the framing device of her diary, while it is incredible and helps make this so good, I think, there's some points where we have to get parts of the story that Rose would not be privy to. Therefore, despite the fact that Rose is not an omniscient narrator, we learn things that could only occur if she was. So that's a bit awkward, but it doesn't take away from the story. The story at the core and the writing in general is mostly really good. And I really like that Rose resembles an 18th century Jean Grey. So in a way, Wolverine's love and passionate feelings for Jean Grey could be tied subconsciously in a way to the fact that she resembles the first woman he ever loved, even if he doesn't remember Rose, because, amnesia. The fact that she looks like Rose, subconsciously, I imagine, played a big role in his love for Jean Grey. Adam Kubert, as the guy who designed all the characters here, I think deserves a lot of credit for that as a decision, because I don't think that was something Quesada, Jemis, or Jenkins came up with. I think that was an Adam Kubert decision, because Adam Kubert had a lot of freedom. He said so himself in the notes here in the deluxe edition trade paperback that I read, that he had a lot of freedom in designing the characters. And I think that was probably a him decision. They had that little visual Easter egg there with Rose's design, and that is just brilliant. I love that. Absolutely incredible. And I really like the fact that this story is set in the 1800s, because Wolverine, an interesting part of his character is that he's so old. He's lived through so much history. His healing factor has just stopped him from aging. So he's old. He just lives life perpetually just like this. It's interesting. He's just had to live through so much. And tying this into the fact that he is so old is great. The original setting was a high school, according to the notes here in the deluxe trade paperback. The original setting that Quesada and Jemis envisioned was a diner. James frequents a diner, and Dog is like a guy who beats him up there, and Rose works there, and he goes there and keeps seeing Rose, and then they're like, hey, this idea is not working out. And this would have been very early 1900s, and then the next idea they came up with was early 1900s, at a high school. It seems like they got really far in this idea. They had several issues with this story outlined before they just eventually realized this is weird, this is not necessarily just all that good, and the kind of writing and such that we're conveying here is too contemporary for something set in the 1900s. We're applying like more late 20th century school kind of stuff to early 1900s. That wouldn't work. So this the idea to set this in such an interesting time period. The 1800s is great. I love when we get to see the 1800s in Marvel. I love that Hellfire Club miniseries from the late 90s, which also shows us the origins of the Hellfire Club, which date back to the 1800s. I love that. So, to me, this is just a slam dunk idea here, and they pulled it off pretty well. I get why people wouldn't like it. I get the arguments against this series' creation, but to me, this is just a great, very artsy kind of series. I must sound so pretentious here, but this is a very artsy kind of series, very outside the realm of what you'd expect or want in an X-Men story, but it delivers. I think a weird kind of, not necessarily avant-garde, but very mature and weird, different kind of story like this works for Wolverine's origins. And this is a series that did really well. Again, like I said, Quesada's very proud of it, and they did a sequel to it as well, which, we'll get to it. We'll get to the cash grab. This is a series with a good legacy behind it. It's generally, over the years, gotten a more positive reappraisal, and it was decently well-liked when it came out. Again, it was divisive, but it has a strong following. I'm glad about that. There's been several collected trade paperbacks and stuff. There's been deluxe editions. The version I read initially was a deluxe edition. It had a bunch of Andy Kubert's black and white rough pencils. Featured a bunch of behind-the-scenes notes and stuff, which was great, and had interviews with Quesada and another one with Paul Jenkins, the scripter for the comic. The version I read for this was a trade paperback that had not only this, but it also has Wolverine Origins 2, the sequel, which came out, I think, a decade later. We'll get to that one. I think one might be next. And my point is that this has been collected in various editions over the years. Very nice deluxe editions, some hardcovers too. It's very worth the read if you can pick it up. Just adore this series so much. It's not everyone's thing, and I agree with all the arguments against this series too. We shouldn't know Wolverine's backstory. It does demystify the character, but I think that if we had to get a Wolverine origin series made, I'm glad we got this one made, because I'm glad we got the series made, because this is a story worth telling. This is a great story. The way we have this framed as Rose's diary is great, and the way they end this with the framing device in mind is so horribly nihilistic and cynical, yet mildly funny and amusing at the same time. It's a perfect ending, I think, in a way, because a Wolverine story can't just end with tragedy, and a Wolverine story can't just end with triumph. So just giving this an ending like that, I think, was just a perfect kind of cynical note to end things on. If you can find the series, you can, again, collected editions abound. I would very much recommend it. I would say that if you don't want the mystery of Wolverine's origins, if you don't want to know it, then that's fine. You don't have to read this, but I, again, love this. But I think I'm really happy we got this series, and I'd have to give it on a number scale. It's not a 10. I've mentioned some issues here. I love this series to death, but I mentioned some issues here. There's some others I didn't go into as well. The framing device has its limits, and unfortunately, some of the things this story needs to show you are beyond the limitations of this framing device. That is probably my biggest complaint. Hold up for a sec. I forgot to take my medicine. Let me get on that real quick. I'll probably edit the breakout. Alright, I'm back. So anyways, my other major, well, not major, but it's a significant complaint. A lot of the details here, I like the show don't tell kind of approach this series has, but I kind of wish they showed you more instead of just implying things. Because the implications leave so much, maybe that's the intention, that the implications leave so much to your imagination that you fill in the blanks. It was fun, talking about my headcanon, which, might very well be what happened. Who knows? But to me, I kind of wish they explained more, I guess. A lot of stuff is left up to interpretation, which might very well have been the intention. But I still wish that we had more explained to us. told to us, shown to us, because the last 4 issues focus so much on James's life working in the mine at the Yukon, but I think that more needs to be explained with the Howlett estate and what's up with Mr. Logan and all that. That's only shown in the first 2 issues, really, and I really think we should have had more of that. Maybe like an even split. The first 3 issues are focused solely on the half of the story at the Howlett estate, and the final 3 are focused solely on like the stuff that happens at the mine in the Yukon. But instead, we have this weird thing where the 3rd issue starts at the Howlett estate, but then we go to the Yukon pretty quickly, and then, the characters are trying to forget what happened there, and it's just, okay, we're just so many questions left unanswered. And, maybe answering all the questions will demystify this story. If you demystify this story, if you demystify everything, maybe it will devalue it in a way. Kind of like how a lot of people argue that this series existing devalues Wolverine's past a bit. So I can see a case for that too, but it's just me. Well, what can I say? I like to know things. So on a number scale, I'm going to give this probably a 9 out of 10. Loved it. Incredible. Thought this was excellent. Not perfect at all, but really good. It has some issues that hurt it, but it does not really make this story bad in any way. I think it's a really well done story, personally, and I am just excited to have been rereading this the whole time. I was looking forward to this, thinking that whole Rise of Apocalypse episode. I cannot wait to talk about Wolverine Origin. And yeah, I love talking about it. I love rereading it. Just rereading it, I was thinking, oh, the beautiful artwork, the awesome setting. It's just wonderful. And to me, I kind of liked seeing that James Howlett was a very sickly kid. Because I was a sickly kid when I was young. So, maybe this is a wake-up call for me. Maybe deep down, this is just a wake-up call. If Wolverine went from this sickly kid to this absolute Chad, then maybe that needs to be me. Maybe this is my wake-up call to go from sickly kid to absolute Chad. And Hichikara, she quite enjoyed this. Her reaction initially just, how does this factor into the X-Men? Like, oh no, this is just the childhood of Wolverine. You'll get to it eventually, the actual X-Men stuff. This is just his childhood. She liked the art and everything. Said it was a bit manga-esque, which I don't necessarily see, though. I guess that whole, Image era of comic books has a bit of a manga lineage to it. When you consider some of the... Rob Liefeld talked about this. I'm going to lose all credibility here as a comic book fan, but I've listened to Rob Liefeld's podcast, Robservations, Rob Liefeld. I know so many people hate Rob Liefeld. He's like a punching bag when it comes to classic comic book artists. But he talked about in his podcast, Robservations with Rob Liefeld, that a lot of those Image-era creators had a lot of manga influence. He did, Whilce Portacio did, Jim Lee. A lot of them had a lot of manga influence in them, including him. Rob Liefeld has talked about how manga had a significant influence on a lot of the comic artists because it was just starting to reach American shores by the mid to late 80s. He was telling me Marvel did an English edition of one popular notable manga from the 80s. I think it was Akira. I'm not entirely sure, but I mean that tracks. So I guess I can see the Kubert brothers being from that era. I could definitely see how maybe Andy has a bit of a manga influence in his art. I don't see it. Maybe that's just because of the way this is inked and colored. Maybe I'll find it when I see some of his later works, when we get to Andy's work in the 90s. But yeah, she liked this one a bit, which made me happy because this is one of my favorites. My general hope with her going through this is that I get a real outsider perspective on this, both for feedback on my list, so I can know potentially what edits to make, and also because I just think it's fun having someone with no familiarity with Marvel at all just going through this and having this be their first experience, As far as I know, I haven't read everything, and a lot of the stuff I read during the pandemic, which was 5-6 years ago at this point. Holy crap. So I could be wrong about this, but because my memory might not be clear, might have missed something in reading. But I don't believe this comes up again in any major or significant way outside of the sequel, Wolverine Origin. Who's calling me? Potential spam.
Hey, you. I was just thinking about you. And that talk we had the other night.
Do not want to know what this is. Block. Sweet. You'll no longer see call from this number. Awesome. Okay, yeah. I don't believe the events of this series are relevant to anything in particular outside of the sequel. Yeah, there's Wolverine Origins by Daniel Way, and the events of this series are referenced there quite a bit, but not much. Wolverine Origins by Daniel Way has nothing to do with this series. The premise for that is Wolverine gets his memory back and goes on a quest for revenge against the people who wronged him in his past. So I don't believe this has much of any relevance outside of itself and the sequel. But it's still a great story, and I quite like it. I would very much recommend it. I'd say this is a pretty good comic for beginners, even, because while it is not indicative of anything else on the list at all, it's a great story. It's very interesting, and shows us the early years of one of the most significant characters in Marvel's history. I think this is very much worth a read. Whether you're a veteran X-Men fan or someone just jumping on for the first time, I would highly recommend Wolverine Origin. Again, 9 out of 10. Has its issues, but it's a great story despite those. Very much recommended. One of my favorite X-Men related miniseries ever published. I just adore this so much. So happy to have gotten to talk about it. What'd you guys think? Did you like the book? Did you hate it? Do you really just hate this book on the conceptual level? Do you have an issue with the story? Did you love it? Did you love the story? Hey, what do you think of this book? Let me know in the comments, and love to discuss this series. It's one of my favorites. Just very much worth the read, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Remember, next time we're reading Wolverine Origin 2, so you want to be there for that in preparation for it. You can find that in its own collected editions, and you can find that in collected editions with this miniseries as well. Welcome you to read it with me next time. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.